My name's Stephanie Smith, and I'm the Senior Director of the Tax Treaties Group at the Department of Finance Canada. And I guess, as is obvious from the name, I am primarily responsible for Canada's tax treaties, both negotiating the treaties, but also responsible for developing tax policy recommendations for the Minister of Finance on complex international and tax treaty issues.
My name is Keith Lawson. I am the Deputy General Counsel for Tax Law at the Investment Company Institute and ICI Global. We're the National Trade Association for Collective Investment Vehicles, mutual funds in the United States. Funds are investment vehicles for investors of moderate means as a general matter. Most funds are open-end, which means that an investor can send money directly to the fund company or through an intermediary and have that money invested with other monies from other investors to save for long-term needs. There are other types of vehicles that trade on a stock exchange, for example, but they all have the same objective, which is pooling assets among moderate income investors, portfolio management expertise that you get from making those investments, and diversification of risk.
We mean funds that are widely held, hold a diversified portfolio of securities, and that are subject to investor protection regulation in their home jurisdiction.
They make relatively small portfolio investments in companies, so they are a good source of capital for developing and developed countries. And investors look to the after-tax return. And so it's really important to try to minimize, consistent with treaty and all of the relevant treaty shopping provisions, to minimize the tax that's withheld on portfolio investments. Certainty is a huge issue for funds. Open-end funds in particular, mutual funds in the United States, UCITS in the EU, for example, price their securities every day. Investors can buy in at what we call the net asset value on a daily basis, and they can get their money out every day at the NAV. The fund needs to know whether or not its assets, including its receivables for treaty benefits, are going to be received, collected, or not. The funds go to great lengths to work with their custodians, to work with outside counsel, to work with the tax authorities in relevant jurisdictions, to make sure that they know that they're going to get treaty relief.
And secondly, neutrality is very important. We want to ensure that there is neutrality between a direct investment and an investment through a CIV. It's important that middle-class investors have access to a diverse portfolio of investments that they may not otherwise be able to achieve if they were investing directly. This is often a domestic policy priority to ensure neutrality. And the issue with tax treaties is ensuring that we can also achieve that neutrality in an international context. As a negotiator, I'd like to see that benefits are actually achieved in practice. Administrative difficulties and legal difficulties in terms of obtaining the relief. The legal form of CIVs varies substantially from country to country, and they can be companies, trusts, contractual arrangements, joint ownership. Tax treatment in domestic countries can also vary depending on the CIV, and so it is very difficult for a foreign country to make those determinations with respect to CIVs on the basis of the basic concepts of person, resident, and beneficial owner.
And even if the fund does qualify or is viewed as likely to qualify, there can still be questions about whether or not the underlying investors, that you have a limitation on benefits provision, for example, whether the underlying investors are treaty entitled. So you have both substantive questions and you have proof questions that can be problematic for for a fund trying to establish treaty eligibility, which is one of the reasons that we're so appreciative of the work that the UN has done here.
Generally speaking, it's a problem of proof because CIVs are often held through a chain of intermediaries. And because investor information is proprietary, they do not want to share this information with the next person in the chain because they're talking about someone who may be a potential competitor in another investment situation. So as a result, CIV units are often held in nominee accounts, and the CIV itself may not know the exact identity of all of its underlying owners. And we've also noted the issue of the fact that those change on a daily basis. And so it's very difficult to accurately track that on a frequent basis and as changes occur. And so while the identity of the particular investor is very difficult to obtain, the tax residency of the investors is often easier to establish and is less likely or in fact unlikely to change very significantly, at least in a short or medium term.
They provide alternative methods by which governments can make these determinations about treaty eligibility. There are ways for funds that should meet the requirements in their own right to be determined. There's in the commentary you talk about what it requires to be a person, to be a resident, to be the beneficial owner.
One important addition in this model was providing a definition of a recognized pension fund. And the benefit of this is to ensure that a pension fund that meets the definition is considered a resident of the contracting state in which it is established. It's certainly my hope that they will. I hope that it will promote not only a discussion of the issues, but a more informed discussion of the issues than may have taken place in the past.
They will be helpful to administrators because the commentary is very good in terms of explaining the structures of funds, the reason for the funds, and going through the technical requirements. And so to the extent that there's a question of whether a fund is treaty entitled, the tax administrators can look to the commentary to understand better what the requirements are as they apply to funds as opposed to how they would apply to other vehicles. It allows for a dialogue between taxpayers and tax authorities, and even between tax authorities and tax authorities regarding the eligibility requirements.